with that, let's kick it off with Frank from Health Decisions Lab and Logan from Startup Health. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you too. And hey, Logan, how are you doing?
Good to see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loudly and clearly. First of all, give us a kind of a 1-minute introduction to yourselves and kind of where are you and which part of the world are you in, since everyone's from everyone's virtualized everywhere these days.
Sure. I'll start, Stan. I am Logan Plaster from Startup Health, the media director and editor-in-chief over here. I am living in Baltimore. Our team is really dispersed all around the country and the globe. We are at Startup Health. We're on a mission to invest in really a massive global network of entrepreneurs around what we call health moonshots. These really big, audacious health goals, like bringing the cost of care down to zero and opening up access to care to billions of people. And so we do that around our sort of unique investment thesis. Over the last decade, we've invested in about 360 companies from 26 countries. And we really focus on that health moonshot concept of cohorting companies around these themes, bringing in entrepreneurs who really put that health moonshot focus even as more essential than their personal success. And then secondly, we support all of that through really our own media program, where we've decided that health innovators really haven't gotten the coverage that they deserve for what they're working on. And so we really, over the last decade, created that media network in order to tell the stories of health moonshot progress day after day to an audience of hundreds of thousands of people. So excited to be here with you, Stan. Excited to talk about sort of the startup trends that I saw at HIMSS and take questions from the audience.
Love it. It's a great background. Thank you. And Frank, again, really appreciate your time today, knowing how busy you are, and would love to hear a little bit about your background as well.
That's okay. I'd love to talk about it. My name is Frank Cutitta. I'm based in the Boston area. I run a company called HealthTech Decisions Lab, which really gets into the minds of healthcare IT buyers. I spent about 6 years on the global board at HIMSS. So I looked at it from the outside, from the board level. I spent 3 years on the inside because I couldn't sit on my hands during the board period. So I came in to drive some innovation there, and then got sick with COVID for a better part of last year, and then I'm back working for HIMSS as a contractor and a consultant, as well as a university professor at Northeastern University and University of New England, teaching a wide variety of healthcare management and communications and usability courses.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate your dedication and your service to academia, and thank you for that. And sure. While we're with you, Frank, let's start off with some of what you picked up and learned from HIMSS 2021. What were some of the insights that you gleaned from the meeting?
Well, it was interesting just being there. So that was part one. What I learned was that it was safe to be there. Having been sick for a while, you have this trepidation before you even go, especially of all places going to 117-degree Las Vegas, which is crazy under the best of circumstances. So that was the first thing I learned, that it was safe to go, and that it was an unbelievably exhilarating experience, both from the academic point of view in terms of the content that was delivered, but just from the community point of view too. You had a lot of pent-up energy there of people that wanted to get together to meet and discuss with their peers. In terms of topics, I mean, there are just so many topics, one of which is sort of indicative of the way that the conference was run, sort of branching digital and on ground, which was sort of a metaphor for healthcare in general, that people are wondering, how can you conduct a Congress that used to have 45,000 people with butts in seats, and now do it in a way that is both digital and butts in seats as well. And that was a big part of the learnings there, I think, because we battle with this with telemedicine. Is there going to be a whiplash of telemedicine and going back to the butt in the doctor's office seat? And I think what we saw there is that there will be the continuation of both of those, both in healthcare and in healthcare conferences as well. But the major topics, obviously artificial intelligence came up constantly. I think the most interesting transition that I saw was that of cybersecurity going from a prevention mode, which I think we've all heard about, how do you protect against this, to a response mode with many of the experts there. One of the best cybersecurity sessions I've ever seen was the cybersecurity guy from Facebook and from Twitter and a hacker from Israel talking about, you're not going to stop at what's going to happen when it happens, and how you have a response infrastructure in place to take care of that, especially on the human side, not necessarily even on the technology side. But many more findings.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on too. And cybersecurity is front and center these days with certainly the gas pipeline attack that we saw, and now some of the meatpacking plants that are being attacked, and certainly I think hospitals and life science companies, health plans are at the front of the battle of the pandemic, and they're all at risk for this. So cybersecurity and healthcare is absolutely critical. Logan, on top of some of the cybersecurity learnings that Frank picked up, what else did you pick up at HIMSS attending that this year?
Yeah, I mean, first off, same feeling in terms of just the value and excitement of being at the meeting and the power of an in-person meeting. First impression, just that in-person meetings aren't going anywhere. And the ability to sit down and look somebody face to face was just very powerful and strong. Very happy that no big outbreaks came out of the event, that it seemed to be a safe event. For me, really focusing in the startup area and having been at events like this over the last decade, what I came away with was this idea that the disruptors are getting disrupted. And for so many years, whether it was HIMSS or the ATA, it felt to me as though the telemedicine providers were the ones really at the gate trying to disrupt the system. And, as we know, COVID brought this historic adoption of virtual care. And it has been amazing to see the rate at which those telemedicine providers, the big enterprise players in that market, have become the dominant players to be disrupted by startups. And so more and more, I'm talking to young entrepreneurs who are taking aim at the Amwells and Teladocs of the world and seeing how they need to break down that legacy thinking, which to me is almost humorous, thinking how long those groups worked to really sort of topple their system. And so COVID just sped up this pace of innovation. It gave permission to entrepreneurs to say, what previously seemed impossible is now possible in terms of adoption, in terms of speed. We had this idea, we were frustrated before, now there seems to be potential. Part of that comes with younger founders. I mean, something I noticed was just how young some of these folks were who are creating the next generation of startups, trying to challenge the big players. One that comes to mind is a company called AvoMD with a young founder named Yair Saperstein. First year in medicine, he gets to the bedside and he realizes, the amount of information you're trying to get me to memorize and hold is ludicrous. So I think a few years ago, there was frustration with the system. And now young entrepreneurs are saying the old way, the fee-for-service models, the mystery bills aren't just frustrating. They are untenable. And so that's creating this more rapid innovation cycle, which I think is very exciting.
That's really helpful. And, I think when we look at the disruption in the ecosystem and we look at tech disruption in general, it really comes in three major waves. It comes from either a wave of new technology stacks, like a mobile set or a mobile phone, something like that. Or it comes from a new technology feature, like voice integration or touchscreen. Or it comes from a major economic disruption where something can be offered much more efficiently and with much higher quality. So, and all of those things in today's ecosystem are coming to bear. So that's really critical. Frank, from your perspective, talk a little bit about the difference between HIMSS 2019 and HIMSS 2021.
Well, I mean, everything for obvious reasons was preceded with the term "for the past 18 months." That didn't obviously happen in 2019, but I'm a content guy, and it was sort of interesting, and I still think that we that's really, really important. But I think eventually we need to get away from that. So everything was, for the past 18 months. Here's what happened. And I think there were so many things that were wrapped in COVID, and this is not just at HIMSS, but at every conference, you have to have pandemic someplace in the title or in the promotional materials. I think the important thing is that that COVID magnified many of the things that were previously presented in the pre-pandemic era. And I think the fact, I mean, obviously telemedicine just didn't appear because of COVID, but it was magnified because of it. And there are other aspects of telemedicine that have absolutely nothing to do with COVID, which I think are important to note. So what I think the difference is that it took some of the things that were brought to the fore because of the pandemic and made them more mainstream and made them in a way more debatable about whether they will be there for what we constantly refer to as the new normal. And that's a really big question. And I think that in terms of the next HIMSS, I mean, I think we will be closer to the new normal era and discuss some of those things that are going to happen, whether you have a knee replacement or whether you have a pandemic disease. So I mean, interoperability is a perfect example. I mean, it's my experience as a patient was that I was very dissatisfied with the interoperability that I found as I was laying in my bed, and the guy next to me who had a knee replacement, it was dealing with the same kind of interoperability issue. So I think we have to be careful of gravitating of everything's related to COVID, and look at the fact that that it's going to be there regardless.
That's fantastic. And Logan, tell us a little bit about, you talked about some of the disruptors and who you saw in terms of just how young they were and how much they had been really coming together with some new and really disruptive ideas. What speak specifically, you don't have to mention company names if you don't want to, but talk a little bit more about that and which sectors did you see them entering, whether it's payer, provider, life science, employer, or direct to patient, and which therapeutic areas, talk a little bit about that in the germane, if you will.
Yeah, I'd say the big one that really comes to mind is what Frank just said about interoperability. I think of a company, Particle Health, that is, building a new API to access patient data securely. And really, you asked the question about sort of younger founders. Really, it's an ethos question of how much of the old system are we going to accept? How much of the old way, the old frustrations of interoperability will we accept? How long will we accept fax machines as a mode for transition, for transferring medical data? You have a sort of bridge generation that might say, oh, that's unfortunate that we're doing that. And then you have founders like Troy Bannister with Particle Health who say, my mission in life is to kill the fax machine. I believe that's their hashtag. And so so frustration becomes just more than someone can bear. And so I see that with interoperability. Interoperability was a big theme with Avo MD that I just mentioned, another very young founder, and just this idea, that the system is not thinking about the provider as a human being. And that's a theme that I'm seeing as well. Just a provider focus to say, look, burnout is real. Burnout is going to kill some of my colleagues. You can't put this kind of pressure on me for this long. And so what was born in the past becomes something that we have to deal with. And we're seeing that in a variety of areas. But I think, interoperability is a huge piece. We will not stand for the old, broken pathways, the siloed data, and then also this provider focus. We won't stand for just sort of the moral injury that can happen in medicine without more thought towards the tools that the physician has at their disposal.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. And think about it. I don't know how many of you guys subscribe to the McKinsey newsletter that they have on a daily basis, but yesterday they highlighted provider burnout, or it might have been on Tuesday. And again, we can post that article into the chat box here for everybody to click on the link there. But you know, when McKinsey starts talking about provider burnout, you know that it's gone from a big issue to a big issue with optics to a big issue with optics at the board level for hospitals around the country. And we do know that is, I mean, even before the McKinsey article, they just highlighted it and summarized it nicely, as they always do. But we do know that it is a critical issue. We saw just at Columbia Medical Center and New York Presbyterian last spring some horrendous cases of burnout and some of the eventual outcomes there. And I think one of the things that we're really focused on is trying to help those physicians and trying to help the frontline clinicians, whether they're lab techs or nurses or PAs or whatever it might be, do better and help support them through this brutal time, you know, environmentally and endemically. And Frank, you've been a part of HIMSS for a long time. I know I've been attending HIMSS since 1991 when I first started teaching at Quinnipiac, and it's an extraordinary meeting. You know, normally it's 100,000 people. Normally it's, you know, it's a festival in and of itself. Who doesn't love Cerner Bingo Night? You know, that incredible traditions and incredible things. You can actually sit on the floor and talk to developers who are actually doing the work behind the scenes and get real answers from them and what's happening, what APIs are being integrated. From your standpoint, this year's hybrid meeting, what did you think of it, and how did it work in terms of having a bunch of folks on site, but also a bunch of folks online? You know, you've been an employee with HIMSS. How did it work, and is this a part of what we're looking at in the future?
It's not going to go away at all. In fact, it is the form of meeting of convening now, and because of travel restrictions that will still remain, some places getting even worse, you've got to do it. The challenge is replicating peer-to-peer interaction. So obviously everybody sitting and eating rubber chicken at the lunch table can do that, or having breakfast can meet people and do badge sniffing and look around and see who's there. You've got to find a way of digitizing that, and I think it's really important to do that. We experimented with that this year in what we call the digital dialogue setting, where we on purpose just set up a session that was nothing but people talking with each other. It took some people getting used to it, but the chat side of it was, like on this screen, was exploding. Some people jumped in and discussed it, but that's the one thing that's missing, having that breakfast conversation and where are you from and what kind of stuff are you doing. But that'll come along. That'll come along. It takes training. It's, again, I use the metaphor of telemedicine. You can have the platform, but it doesn't mean that the people are great that are using telemedicine. I mean, they're not trained telemedicine actors and professionals. I spent a lot of time looking at the bald spot on my specialist's head in telemedicine. So you've got to build that medium, and I think it's happening. But the whole what I call the circadian rhythms of events is changing. People are much more interested in buying a la carte. You know, I want this session from this conference. I want this, just like we do with streaming video. I want to watch this show. I want to watch that. And so that presents a challenge for the 45,000 person conference provider on the ground that doesn't have a backup.
Okay, that's spot on. And then last question to take us home, Logan. You know, we talked about trends, and we talked about some of the companies that you've seen. What's the one big trend that you see carrying us forward over the next year between now and the HIMSS 2022? What are we going to be talking about then that you will have called out as the soothsayer that you are, being able to see these trends come together? What are you predicting for the big trend between now and the next 6 months or so?
You know, I mean, this is a bit of a repeat, but I would just say that we're at an incredibly powerful inflection point in health innovation. Looking back over the funding reports that we've published from 2020 and 2021, 2020 was sort of a surprise record year for funding. Really didn't know how much it was gonna put health innovation funding on ice. It came roaring back, record year. 2021 is on pace to double 2020 in terms of health innovation funding, which is crazy, which is enormous. So the energy there, what I'd say is at HIMSS, I was able to sort of anecdotally confirm that, in that all the startups that I talked to a person had their dance card full of meetings with investment companies and potential partners. And so just the excitement and energy around what's possible, when you see another sector of the industry really reshape itself, you realize, you know what, that could happen in the sector that I'm working in. And the entrepreneur, the investor, the partner all come together around that potential. And that has real power to realize that the impossible dream, that health moonshot dream that you had, actually is achievable if we kind of drop the barriers, we collaborate, we bring the funds together. So that my big theme is just incredible collaborative potential moving into the end of the year. There's nothing stopping us.
That's great. Well, again, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Logan, for your time, not just in preparing for the session today, but also for actually being here today. Thank you both. And a virtual round of applause from the attendees all over the world watching with us today.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Again, great start off to the 3 hours here today from two folks that were actually at HIMSS 2021 in Las Vegas, and we're able to hear and see and meet a lot of the true innovators in the healthcare ecosystem that are out there putting this together. and really exciting to see that too. It's something that we've waited for 18 months. I think everyone's super happy to see that we've got this this new ecosystem of an endemic America that is coming together, and really in a place where everyone is able to work together and be in a better place and a better system.